On this week's episode of our Why Buy series, we're talking about the 2023 Porsche 911 Sport Classic. Let's get into it. So what is the 911 Sport Classic? Well, first off, it's not the first time Porsche has done this. They actually did it on the 997 911, but that car was for the European market only. None of them came to North America, so we didn't really get to see the car. There's been a few that have trickled in under show and display over the past couple years, but for the most part, we didn't know a whole lot about it. They only made 250 of them. They were very rare. But now Porsche has brought them to the North American market, and they've done it on the 992 platform. So we have to start with the most glaring and obvious aspect of this car, and that is the design. This is one of the most gorgeous modern 911s that Porsche has done. So first, you'll notice the color. This car is finished in Sport Classic Gray, which is actually derived from Fashion Gray that came out on the 356. And then you have the ghost stripes on the car, a lighter gray ghost stripe on the car that goes from the hood to the roof all the way to the back. Up front, you have a channeled carbon fiber hood leading to the double bubble roof, which we've seen before in the 911R, also in a lot of the RSs. And then in the back, you've got the 1973 RS inspired ducktail, which not only looks great, but actually has a function as well that we'll talk about a little later. With this car, you get the Fuchs style wheels, some gold emblems, and then Porsche, like they always do, has such an attention to detail. We were going through the car and noticed that the hood badge looked a little different, and of course we compared it to some of the other cars here, and sure enough, the badging on this car is reminiscent of the classic original Porsche badge versus the new modern badge. So really cool attention to detail there. You'll notice on the Sport Classic as well that even though it's derived from a turbo, you lose the intakes on the side. So it's a nice, sleek, clean look with the wide rear turbo hips. Moving to the inside of the car, the gorgeousness continues. You have a cognac manufacturer exclusive interior, which, look, a Turbo S is a great interior, but there's something about this interior. You sit in there, the smell of it's different, the feel of it's different. It's just such an elevated experience when you're inside of the car. You have the Pepita inserts, the green nostalgic gauges inside the car. Of course, this car has Burmester sound system and all of the gizmos and gadgets that you get on the modern 992. So moving to the performance aspects of the car, you have 543 horsepower, 442 foot-pounds of torque. And if you're comparing that to a standard turbo, that's less horsepower and less torque. But what you get is a 7-speed manual transmission, which makes this the most powerful manual 911 since the 2011 GT2 RS, which had 620 horsepower. So although it is derived from the turbo, you do get a few things from the Turbo S. You get some anti-roll bars, the rear wheel steering, you get adaptive dampers that all come from the Turbo S. So it's cool that you get some of the main performance of a turbo that's blended with some of the handling aspects of a Turbo S. And as we talk about later when we're driving the car, it does make it a unique driving experience. Speaking of unique, that duckbill spoiler on the back is more than just a good looking feature. It actually has a function. So Porsche removed the intakes from the side of the body, and they actually put that intake in the spoiler. So if you're looking down at the car, you'll notice one large opening at the front end of that spoiler and the radiators underneath there. So just adds to that cool way that Porsche focused on design with this car, but they needed the performance of the cooling for the engine as well and placed it there. So let's take this car out on the road, see what it's about, and let you guys know what the driving experience is like. So before we get into what the Sport Classic is like to drive, I want to go on a little tirade here about something that I think goes a little overlooked or maybe a little taken for granted, and that is just the quality that the Porsche 911 has. And it is across most of their lineup, but especially in the Sport Classic, everything you touch in here, everything, from opening the door to pulling the door in with the door pull to all of the switches and buttons to activate the sport exhaust to the gauges, the steering wheel, everything in here is of the highest quality. This is an extremely well-made, extremely well-built car. And I think because Porsche has done such a great job across their lineup, it's something we take for granted. But just wanted to say that being in here really reminds you of how quality of a product Porsche puts out there. So now that I've done that, the Sport Classic specifically is such a great place to sit. You've got the Pepita underneath you, the very fine leather, the smell of just all of the quality products in here really lets you know that you're in something special. As far as the driving goes, you've got a manual turbo. So it is a great car to drive by all objective measures. It's fast. You get the manual transmission, which lets you feel engaged with the car. I spent a lot of time in a Sport Classic in the mountains, and I came away impressed. It's a fantastic car to drive, but there's something that really stands out to me, and that's all 911s. I mean, the 911 is a sports car, so they all perform pretty well, very well actually, on the road, but you do have a different spectrum of cars, and that is either a GT, kind of a car you can daily drive to the office comfortably, or a hardcore RS sports car that's unforgiving, suspension's tough. This Sport Classic definitely airs more on the GT driver side of things. This is a car that, yes, it has performance. Yes, the rear wheel steering gets it around corners very quickly. But overall, all of the features and touches and quality of the interior and speed of the turbo engine, it really sets up well to just be a cruiser. Be a car that you can go across state lines in comfortably, quickly, but comfortably. And I think that's really important to clarify when you're talking about the driving experience and each of the cars that we're reviewing, because within that driver segment, you've got a couple different lenses to look at, which is it a GT car? Is it a car that you can daily drive? Or is it a hardcore sports car? So that being said, the Sport Classic delivers in spades when it comes to being a daily driver, a GT car. Comfortable, has plenty of performance, just an overall fantastic build by Porsche. Add in the looks that we were talking about earlier, and you have something that's very, very special. Now, let's talk about who this car is for. So as always, where does the Sport Classic fall within the collector and driver spectrum? Well, I have to admit this was a tough one because I had the privilege of driving a Sport Classic in the mountains for our Merritt Mountain Tour, and it was a fun car, great car to drive, just like it was on our drive here. So I had to actually remove myself from that experience and really analyze what this car is all about. And at the end of the day, we decided that this car is more on the collector side of the spectrum. There's a lot of reasons for that. First, it is a numbered Porsche, and it falls very close to that 1,000 unit number that we like to see. 1,250 units of these were produced. So it checks that box. It is one of the most, if not the most, gorgeous modern 911s that we've ever seen. So as far as a car that you open your garage and you see there standing in front of you and take your breath away, it checks that box in spades. We were walking around here with one of my clients the other day, and we came behind this car and looking at it, and just the rear end of the Sport Classic is one of the best looking rear ends on any 911. They knocked it out of the park. The other thing is, if you want a driver, now it's not to say that you can't take this to a local Cars and Coffee every once in a while and to a date night and really enjoy the luxuriousness of what a Sport Classic is. You can certainly do that, but if you're looking for a car to put a lot of miles on and to drive to and from work, or drive on the roads near you that have some twisties, I would honestly go more towards a GTS. You can get a GTS in a manual. If you look at the performance figures, they're actually very similar between a Sport Classic and a GTS. And a GTS is a car that you can put 10,000 miles on and not experience a whole lot of depreciation. So for a driver aspect, I would have to go more with that car than with a Sport Classic, and mainly because of that option, the Sport Classic fits perfectly within that collector bucket. So if you guys have any questions about the Sport Classic itself, or about our driver collector philosophy, we would love to have a conversation with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.